can see that.
Call the meeting to order. We do have a quorum. Mr. Loberg joining us via Zoom from home. Take a motion to approve the agenda and the minutes. For a second,
I'll second it.
all in favor, aye?
All right.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion carried. Rich Brown,
Good morning, how are you guys?
good.
105 got painted on Saturday, 105 is open. They'll be taking some signs down, they still have some mailbox adjustments to do, but everything's kind of minor after that, so. I know most people thought it was already open, but it's official now with the paint down, so.
Good.
390th, the concrete pavement has been paved, it was. The last section was put down Friday afternoon, it's been covered with insulated blankets all weekend. We're waiting on the dirt contractor to come back in and reshape the shoulders, so that the guardrail guys can get, come in, and then that one can be passable. I don't know what we're gonna do with paint on there because it's so cold now. I don't know if they're gonna get a paint contractor in. It's a small stretch, so who knows, but for the most part, hopefully the dirt guys, they're supposed to be in today, hopefully they get some stuff shaped up. The guardrail guys, once they come in, they'll have half a day and they'll have that done, so we'll just kind of when we get it, but hopefully the dirt guy shows up today to get some stuff squared away. And we've been looking at that crossing and that tile thing a little bit. You know, we were talking about the elevations on the plans. We went and shot it. You know, you got macadam base underneath there. You got that larger stone in the waterway. All the grades were shot. So whether that, we don't know yet, but
Okay.
whether that tile was partially submerged before the project or not, I don't know. But when you got a waterway with an established flow line, you meet in the middle, and that's the flow line. So
Mhm.
it is what it is. So we'll see what happens here, but we haven't, you know, with the dirt guys coming in yet and having the crossover there, the pipe hasn't been pulled out yet to open things up and see what happens. So,
I'm sure it's been years since that old ditch has been addressed too.
right, so anyway, that's where we're at with the projects.
Okay.
I got an email from Freeborn Wind last week, a week before last week, I think it was. And we received their reimbursement check for all the damages and the perceived damages in the hard service roads. We've deposited that, but they want a letter stating, or they want clearance stating that they are free from their road ordinance or their agreement that they had on that project. From what I can tell, I don't see anything else they need to do out in the rural areas. I don't know if, because I think it was also was that a same agreement with the tile and everything else? I
It's
don't
a
know.
road and drainage
It was
agreement.
a road and drainage agreement. I don't know of any drainage issues, but
They could pop up yet though.
right, but as far as, so I didn't know, I didn't write a letter yet or draft anything. I want to know kind of where you guys want to go with this so that they can move on if there's, I didn't read the document recently to find out how we were going to release them from that, but would you guys like me to draft a letter up and then I'll read through the document a little bit more and find out whether there's got to be some, I don't know, verbiage in there that says if this, then that kind of thing with tile. I don't think we're gonna find any more road issues than what we have now, but
And that meeting just drainage district tile or
I'm guessing it's mostly, your agreement was with
It was
districts.
just the drainage district tile the agreement was, and I would, which is still, irregardless, I would hope that their contracts cover the private and the drainage
Right.
district tile, but, you know, yeah, we could.
And that agreement was recorded, so will they want that released probably?
Well,
Or
they want to be, yeah.
They want to be released.
maybe have Jeff look at it too, possibly before you send it.
Well, I won't send it without you guys. You guys don't
Right.
sign the contract, so I'll draft a letter. I don't think we have anything from any previous projects, do we, Jackie, in the file that we can. So we'll draft something up and let you guys look at it before we send it off, but I know they want to close out that.
Would they have done it with previous?
You know what? No, maybe I'll look at Mitchell counties, because we would have had an agreement there that I'll see if there was a request. I know it's a different company altogether, but I don't recall if they requested anything or not.
Well, and that's
Maybe
the
it was
thing, this was the first one with this company.
and for this county that we had, so I'll do some more, I just wanted to bring it to your attention
Yeah.
and try to get something pushed through, because I know I emailed them, said I would mention it to you guys today on what you guys wanted to do. But on the roadway side, yeah, we've had some issues, I think they've been addressed, and we've been reimbursed for those other things. We've got some granular things that I brought to you guys a few weeks ago that they paid us for that, so we'll take care of that when we get in the spring, when we get our rock run and stuff ready to go, we'll address those. I know we're gonna put up snow fence. I know the guys are out doing some pothole patching, short week this week, so with the good weather, we'll be out blading as much as we can to get the road squared away. But that's all I've got for you this morning.
Ready? Anything else for Rich? You got anything for Rich, Enos?
Just the fact that he sent that email out about TS Express, and that
Oh.
should get discussed.
You know,
I just drove around and I did see pictures online, which is interesting. I mean, I know that the original plan for a new courthouse has an office in there for the county engineer, but wow. If that location is something usable, I even mentioned, I never talked to you about it, but it could be split with as much ground as out there. We could have a cooperative location for conservation and secondary roads, I think. I don't know, Jim, what you,
I mean, because I saw it on Friday and the staff and I looked through the pictures and stuff, and I drew it by, but then done anything. I was gonna kind of just see what you thought.
just what I can tell, there's private offices, I mean, and there's I think you'd still have to put money into some renovation kind of things and probably still have to build building, there's a big cold storage there, but I mean, as far as, I think a lot of the work is done already, that even if we had to still build another building out there, we're not talking.
You're building up cold storage. and stuff.
You're right, you could, so I, without walking through there and without Jim and I actually looking at it, I think there's some possibility. It's
how
just,
much space do we have at the old shop? there?
I was gonna look that up and I never did do a square footage. I don't remember if they,
Acreage wise, it's only a few acres.
up here,
Yeah, I mean, I know the shop would be big.
because this is a total of 8 acres, and what we've got here in town is
Would we be able to part with that and
with, which one?
the old site?
In town here?
Yep.
Oh, I think definitely, yeah.
Okay,
But I mean, I was trying to going through some things, moving a fuel station and everything out, or, things that we would have to invest in is fuel stations. And that'd be a good time to maybe upgrade.
That's all old anyway.
Right, so maybe that, it depends on who, maybe if we sold our site there, somebody might be interested in keeping all that stuff, who knows, but. I think it's a really good option for us to look at, and I know there's other entities looking at that too. But it's a good start for us, and I don't wanna say we should jump the gun and just bite at the first thing that comes up, but it's also a pretty prime location for us too.
I would get 8 acres of pretty decent building. now.
There's- Well,
That
it's got a big
sounds-
building, plus it's got the cold storage there
storage.
already, and then there's 8 acres to
Expand on it.
expand on. And I don't know, we really haven't had many other options available with this size for. So I don't know what you guys think. I don't, we could discuss it more, but
Right.
Okay, then get in and take a look at it.
That's maybe you guys have to do that, get over Julie and go look at it.
We can
If
do
you
that.
get it
if
set
that
up,
works for you.
one of us could go with, you just let us know.
Maybe after the ARP meeting. Try and get hold of Julie and see if something works out even today.
yeah, I think the sooner the better to look. I mean, you can look at pictures, but you don't get a feel for what our equipment size is and what that is in there. I mean, that the existing building. What I vision just now with a drive in and drive out, we got a herringbone type parking, but
Mhm.
what does conservation need? What kind of,
Right.
where do we add on, there's a lot of things, I mean, to put both of us in that established building is gonna be difficult when we've got a lot of large equipment that can go inside, but there's a more or less cold storage, and there could be little areas for welding and maintenance.
Right.
They've got the lean-to on the one side that could be utilized for something so there's a lot of options out there, and I think we should probably look at it at least and see if it fits the bill, or like I said, we're still,
Even if it only works for one of us, I mean, just.
there's still, the ground is there for options, and I think that's the biggest thing is we've got half the battle. I won't say half the battle, but a lot of the battle won if we can get a hold of something like that's already been.
Looks like office space.
I mean, it's been renovated, but I mean, it's a pretty nice, for
That's-
office, just to walk in alone.
Totally different than I remember, just
Yeah.
pictures as a
So-
kid when I was in there, so.
If you guys go, you wanna let me know? Cause if you guys are thinking of office space, I think.
Since they closed.
We can talk about
Bigger
that.
office.
Rescue meeting.
If they go after the rescue meeting, though, we're tied up in another meeting that we have.
Well, we'll play it by ear, because we, like I said, I don't know, if it works for Julie to show up today or
Okay.
anything like that, but.
I would assume-
When you guys go, let me know, just so I can take a look and see what the infrastructure looks like.
Okay.
I think they would update it some.
I think Jim needs one. I don't think he needs anything.
Yeah, well,
Internet.
sounds like a plan. Can you get hold of Julie then? after- after
So you don't
the-
want a string week for the team?
Yeah, that was something that,
Yeah,
interesting, so.
you catch all that, Enos?
Yes, all I know is I talked to Julie on Friday and the school board is looking at it real hard for a bus barn.
And that's how I heard about it, is like, someone said they drove by and saw them pulling buses in there trying to see what they could fit.
Be cheaper.
Well, let's see if we can't get something set up to look at it then, so. Anything else, Rich?
I do not.
All right, drainage. See, we had a few claims. come through.
No. I don't see just that one that she had to redo. Or is there something that I didn't see?
Think there's something that just came in this morning?
Came in from that place that did Gordy Hagen's to get that done,
Oh,
take him off of it.
Hudson.
that's what she
That-
sent us.
Yeah,
We
it's
took care
just
of
the,
that.
yeah, we took
Yeah,
care of
we
it.
took care of that,
Oh,
Enos.
Okay,
Okay,
You'll have to sign it.
sorry.
Yeah, if you feel better sometime this week, I got a bunch of stuff for you to sign.
great.
Bring it back.
Get your hand ready.
Yeah,
Okay, regular claims.
Any questions?
Questions on that, Enos?
What was the Deary of Ames? Is that spray truck? Or what is that?
What was that? How much was that?
how much was it?
52.
Yeah, that was that.
52,882.
That was the spray
Spray
truck.
truck.
Okay, that's what I thought it was.
And I think I've talked to you about if we need to change budget or not, but will you need to adjust anything for any grant money or you?
Mine's already allocated, so mine's just
Okay.
the reimbursement. It's in the land improvements and.
Oh, yeah.
This is just money.
in this one.
Make a motion to approve the claims.
All right, there's motion to approve claims. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
All in favor, aye.
All right,
Aye, opposed? Motion carried.
I was thinking we have claims once a week, but that we be able to get them all hit within a week, but apparently it still doesn't happen.
no,
All right, are there any reports? No. Payroll eligibility or salary changes?
One bump from the sheriff's office.
It's kind of a increase because she got all her education done.
Yeah, and she's due, we want to see what happens, but her probation ends the 23rd of next month, so you might see her get something for that too, but right now it's just the schooling.
Motion to approve the payroll change for Michaela.
I'll make that a motion.
All right, is there a second?
I'll second it.
All in favor, aye?
All right,
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Liquor license?
No.
FEH design contract amendment.
Yeah, you guys, I want to talk about that.
Mhm.
So that came in last week, right?
I wasn't thinking it was any big deal until I saw the amount. And I'm like, can we commit to that when we
That's a-
don't know what's going on yet?
And that's for the next
I don't
step.
think you guys saw
The
that.
next,
I mean, that's almost $1 million. That would be doing the project, basically.
pretty much,
Right,
yeah, it's not, we haven't made,
I don't know if we're that far.
no, I don't think we are.
Hmm,
Well, that's, yeah, because that's, we go into the design phase, basically.
mhm.
I mean, I realize it's part of the steps we talked about here a few weeks ago, but, you know, we got a few other things to
It's kind of a
dot and
shocker.
cross before we could sign a full agreement with somebody. I think that's just my opinion.
Or maybe I'm missing something.
Nope, I agree with you, Mark.
Hey. I mean, I think if we get to that point, we'd be looking, but I don't think we're there.
Not quite ready to get to the design phase, because,
I think you'd have to have stuff rolling with the urban renewal and.
Well,
all that
right,
good
we got all
stuff
those others.
before-
Sure, we can even, and
I don't think it's gonna be January.
I mean, I realize.
I mean, you could
yeah,
wrap it in, but you'd need to know that we had the funding and all that good stuff and.
That's
right, right.
I guess I don't know how all the steps work yet, but
No,
I don't
I,
have $1 million sitting around just for that.
no, no, and I would say, yeah, we gotta work it more on the financing wise on our end before we,
And I think those are the things we talked about in the next 60 days, we need to work hard on, so that if we get to that January, February timeframe, and we're ready to, then we would be proceeding with a step like that. probably. But I
Because we
think
need
we're-
that whole plan. We need to know what Rich's hit list is and
Yep.
this, and I mean, we need the whole thing.
Yep, because there's a few
To have
things we're talking about
priorities
here,
and-
yep. But I think those are things we need to continue to discuss, like say in the next 60 days, and
right,
try to get to some point, or less maybe. You know.
well, then we'll just table that one till a future meeting. So maybe we just, yeah, sometime maybe soon here, we need to get our core committee together again and just have a workshop on it. And, keep working with our bonding need or attorneys to sign it. Okay, wind ordinance discussion. Well, we had the zoning board came in. Shoot, Julie, I'm sorry, you're next.
We're gonna miss you.
I skipped one. Sorry, I took my glasses off.
That was maybe,
Yeah, yes, Julie, step on up.
maybe you were like, maybe if I just quick go over this, maybe she won't talk.
Nope, nope, I apologize.
No worries. Hey, I want to preface my remarks on the draft wind ordinance by first giving some feedback to comments that Mark, you had made in recent weeks. So in conversation with your fellow supervisors, you asked why the wind industry was like being singled out. You asserted that other businesses are not held to, local government regulation, and warned that action of implementing a wind ordinance would perhaps affect future growth in the county. Does that seem, did I kind of summarize that?
Probably close, I don't know if I was said other industries aren't strict regulated or whatever, but
Okay,
yeah, basically, we're singling out an industry right now that's wanting to continue to come to the county,
okay,
so.
okay. Well, I don't agree that the wind industry is being singled out or picked on. Regulations on industry business do exist, and they exist for a number of reasons, including health, safety, and welfare. And in thinking about this and then talking to some others, I bring up just a few instances of like, and keeping in mind that right now in the county as we have it, let alone the road agreements, that basically the wind industry is not regulated. I would bring up like nursing home or anyone that bills Medicare has requirements to meet. The Department of Inspections and Appeals monitors and investigates this. In the case of restaurants, they certainly have to meet with the health department. Anybody that digs a well or puts in the septic system needs to pay for a permit and follow the rules. That's something I always found quite interesting that, as an individual, if I want to put in a well, and I don't think it's going to go down 600 feet, that I have to purchase a permit. CAFOs, I bring them up. The owners certainly would tell you of all kinds of regulations, paperwork they need to abide by or face serious fine. You know, the state does mandate industry and meeting emission standards. New Haven Chemical and Manley was fined twice by the DNR for failing to follow those requirements, and I could go on. When in the history of humankind has it been wise to allow for a for-profit industry to operate without regulations, without oversight? Why doesn't Invenergy have to follow the DNR guidelines? I would have to. As far as the road agreement that Invenergy proposes, am I calling that right? Are they calling it, what are they calling it? What kind of a development agreement?
Just a development.
A development agreement is what they're
It's road drainage and.
It says road and drainage easement maintenance agreement and development. agreement.
Okay, I didn't know the right term. It's not complete, it doesn't have teeth, and it's written to satisfy Invenergy's wants. The proposed wind ordinance is not arbitrary or capricious. It is reasonable, responsible, well-written, and has rationale to support it. Okay, you three have submitted your proposed changes to the draft wind ordinance. And by the way, do you realize how lucky you are? Did you know how lucky you are to be a supervisor right now, AJ?
I wake up every morning.
Okay, all right. That's right. You are so fortunate to have a zoning commission that has stepped up to the plate, done their due diligence, and knocked it out of the park. You have been given rationale supporting the ordinance, and you are now given the requested changes with corresponding edits that are needed if accepted. This is not just a copy and pasted wind ordinance. I asked the supervisors to maintain property line as the setback. From the zoning commission, why are the setbacks, noise limit, and shadow flicker established at the property line instead of a residence? The expectation is that the rights of each property owner should be protected by their government. We all have property rights. To this extent, the right to full enjoyment of their land within reasonable and legal conditions should be accounted for in land use regulations. Since there are safety concerns associated with physical setbacks, and annoyance and nuisance concerns related to noise and shadow flicker, it stands that a personal property at large should be protected versus simply that part of their land that a home may now reside in. If the limits were at current residence versus property line, the right of future enjoyment of a portion of the property could essentially be taken from them for the benefit of another. This taking of rights from a non-participating landowner via regulation for the benefit of another is not deemed appropriate. It is for this reason that the draft establishes the rights and protections at the property lines. It should also be noted that a non-participating landowner is allowed to waive these rights and limits and accept a closer standard. The waivers is all spelled out in there. Keeping the setback distance from the property line puts the development in the hands of the company. It requires the company to talk to all landowners, large and small, and enables all to have a voice and a choice and not be run over by Invenergy agreements. I have heard it said that this will, having these at the property line, having these distances will not allow the project to pursue, to continue. No, I say, there is a waiver system. Invenergy talks about the support it has, 200 landowners, 30,000 acres. It is upon the developer to work with the affected landowners and utilize the waiver system to make the project a go. In Enos's October 4th comment at that supervisors meeting, he makes note that Invenergy land agents had no intent of contacting somebody in the project area because they didn't own enough land. In the commission's rationale of key aspects on number 5, it says, unlike landowner described, certain landowners choose not to give up their rights of protection from the effects. I would also say others aren't even given that opportunity to choose or not, the way it's written. And you need that property line setback to keep that bargaining chip, if you will, in place. It's not for Invenergy to work around the setbacks imposed. It's for them to work with it and the waiver system. Participants are being compensated for, amongst other things, to accept the known effects of wind turbines. All need to be able to have this opportunity for this or be free from the effects. Keeping the setback at the property line is the only way to do this. As far as the repowering aspect that was talked about in the proposed changes, I refer to the commission notes. The one thing I would say is that a turbine host landowner may be fine living next to a 600-foot wind turbine, but a neighbor may not be. Indeed, that neighbor may be living closer than the host would be. So I think having the minimal changes as listed by both Enos and AJ were appropriate. I would recommend all of you to review that October 4th video of the supervisors meeting and look at listen to Jeff Gorball's comments that were powerful and meaningful. The members of the zoning commission have carefully deliberated and crafted this ordinance. I ask you to respect their work and approve what they unanimously brought to the table. Make the changes to refine the ordinance, but keep the basic premise that we all have property rights. Keep setback, noise, limit, and shadow flicker establishment at the property line. So now that I've told you how lucky you are, I leave it in your hands. What goes on from now? What happens now?
We have a little more discussion on it, and if it's something we want to move forward with, we start the public hearing process.
Okay,
And that goes up to 3 meetings before we make a decision on it.
and then as far as,
Back to the zoning board for the final draft first, right? Whatever we decide on the changes.
Yeah, sorry, yeah, we'll go back to that, yeah, on changes, but once it's agreed upon, then we'll go to public hearing process.
yeah, and then as far as the development drainage road agreement,
I don't know. Don't know where that would be if we wouldn't need it if we had an ordinance probably, so.
all right, thank you very, very much for allowing me to come and tell you how lucky you are.
Thank you. All right, well, around the topic, the wind ordinance. Obviously, you guys have both, we've all read over it, had our opportunity to make changes, so they've been adjusted. Is it something we're ready to move forward with, basically? Are you okay with the changes, Mark, Enos? I mean,
Well, we did I don't know if we're all in agreement on all the changes or not. Go back and read that. On the setbacks from property line versus the home or the building site occupied. I think you used occupied. Was it an occupied residence or something was a term they used? Instead of the property line.
yeah, it's
Human occupiable building.
there you go.
There you go.
Human occupiable building. So that would be, yes, anything that could be occupied by human.
Yep.
More or less. So.
So if I may, AJ, this is Jeff.
Go ahead, Jeff.
So the document that we had provided a couple of weeks ago titled Supervisor Proposed Changes to the Draft Wind Ordinance, as Mark says just a moment ago, some of the things that one supervisor wanted to change was related to something that another supervisor wanted to change, but in a different manner. So what we tried to do in that document is dissect all of the individual changes from the supervisors and then organize them in a manner where the related changes were presented essentially as alternatives, if you will. So if you look at the first one, item number 1 labeled change to property line setbacks in table 1, you'll note that Enos and Mark each had submitted a change related to that one entry, the adjacent property lines. You can see that Enos was wanting to change the distance for adjacent property lines, whereas Mark wanted to eliminate setback distances to property lines. Now, Mark's change to eliminate those setback distances to property lines was related to another change that he wanted, which is essentially change property lines to human occupiable buildings. That's contrasted with Enos, where he wants to retain property line setbacks, but a different distance. And then that other change item, where is it? Item 4, where the 3 of you have different distances with regard to human occupiable buildings. So it makes it a little bit more challenging dissecting it this way. But frankly, because each submitted something different, that's the only way that we could present it, so that there could be a discussion and decision on each of the items that the supervisors were discussing.
The only reason I changed adjacent property lines was because of number 4. If we go to human occupiable buildings,
Right.
we wouldn't be using property lines anymore. So then we do need a setback from the property line.
Right. Right.
So I think the first thing you got to figure out is what you want to do in 4, whether you're going to use property lines or human occupiable buildings.
Yeah, that approach works as well. Just so a decision on, decision on property lines versus human occupiable buildings. But then you would come back to your change, Enos, to add back in property lines with a separate distance.
Yep.
So perhaps start with a discussion. And again, we don't have to take each of these things exactly as it was originally submitted by the supervisors and dissected. So, maybe a discussion and vote among the supervisors whether or not you want to eliminate property line setbacks or adjust property line setbacks and add human occupiable residence or human occupiable building, excuse me. And frankly, the reason that that question is coming up now is when the zoning commission looked at it, the zoning commission chose property lines. And so since the setbacks and everything was related to property lines, there was no need to discuss the individual types of buildings, churches, schools, homes, et cetera, et cetera. But if you're going to eliminate or adjust property lines, then it does fall in the need for addressing the buildings.
Okay.
So maybe just to walk through it, kind of eat the elephant one bite at a time, maybe just address the question very discreetly and say, should property line setbacks be eliminated? Which is essentially Mark's proposal in 1B. Have a discussion on that question, the elimination of property lines. if the elimination of property lines pass or fail, then that will give us direction on the next question that has been raised through the supervisor's proposed changes. So for instance, if you say, you know, the elimination of property lines fails, then it begs the next question, do the property lines setback stay or get adjusted, which is Enos item 1A. And we can, you know, kind of walk through it one step at a time that way.
Well, it's obvious, all three just to touch off here, that that is the question, I guess, is, do you want to consider the human occupable building, or do you want to consider the property lines?
Yeah, and just to make it easy to, you know, to address the question discreetly, I think the first question should be elimination of property lines, yes or no. And then there's the subsequent question based on that answer. So if there were a discussion and a motion on elimination of property lines, there would be a separate discussion and motion on adjustment of property lines.
But most ordinances, or probably all ordinances, are written from, just to use the term occupied building, or from the home. Setbacks are usually.
I'm sorry, I didn't.
Setbacks are usually determined from the home in an ordinance, not property lines.
Yeah, there's a mixture out there. Most of the older ordinances just address buildings. They address a few of them, property lines, from a safety perspective, a fall zone, if you will. But they don't use the property line in the manner that this draft ordinance does, that essentially carves out the property at large as opposed to just the buildings. So most of those older ones, they just focus on you know, the effects of things at the buildings and just a fall zone for property lines, which is essentially, you know, the same distances that they use for road rights of way and things of that nature.
Right. Okay. Well, Enos, what do you prefer, I guess?
Well, I guess of all the things that the three supervisors put forth in this thing, that is the one area where we all agreed on that it should go back to human occupiable buildings. You know, otherwise somebody commented on one thing and somebody commented on something else. So I guess we all kind of said the same thing, that we didn't think it should go with the property line. It should go with the human occupiable building. So what do you think?
No, I agree. I mean, that's what we've all said.
Then after that, we've got different setbacks in there. And I guess I broke it down where with a turbine hosting landowner, I just wanted to make sure the manufacturer safety distance was in there, but Mark just came out and said on whether you're a turbine hosting landowner, a non-turbine hosting landowner, use the greater of 1,600 feet or 3.75 times the total height, or the MSD, which is exactly what the zoning and planning and zoning board did. So I seen that you had, is that the next step up in turbines from 590 to 616? Is that why you had yours down the way you had it down?
Yeah, yes, I believe so. Because this way we'd cover, that would be 2,000 feet for everything up to the size that's proposed now. Anything bigger than that would go even farther back.
Well, the size of proposed right now, which is 590s, would be 2213 at 3.75.
At 3.75.
So that's why I'm leaning more towards using the one that Mark put in there, the greater 1,600 feet, and use the human occupiable building.
No, I'm fine with that. Just to make it a little easier to calculate with changing sizes of these things, I guess, if you just put a multiplier on it.
Yep. Have a minimum and then use a multiplier on it. And of course, the manufacturer safety distance.
So then, Enos, you're suggesting that there might be a motion to add human occupiable building setback distance of the greater of 1,600 feet or 3.75 times the total height or manufacturer safety distance as indicated in item 4B.
Yes.
Okay. So then in order
Oh,
for us,
Building. Readiness
what was that, AJ?
from a human occupable building, correct?
Yep.
Yes. Yep.
Any building
So
on the
then-
property.
Yeah. So then to close on this particular change, then you guys would need a motion and a vote to make that change as reflected in item 4 Bravo. And then we would go back to the property line discussion because of Enos change.
Yeah. Well, he had this put in here as going with the building, the occupable building. So I think we're all in agreement of that. If I'm reading this right.
Right. So item 4B, but I think it's important if you guys need to vote on these, or is it just a matter of a conversational consensus on each of these changes?
Should be an action,
Okay.
I would assume.
Well, I mean,
But you're just still going back to revising that ordinance.
No,
aren't
we're gonna
you?
vote-
And
then
then
we'll-
you'll vote on that whole ordinance.
Then we'll, yeah.
yeah, we can
So I
just,
don't know.
Maybe I'm
Maybe,
wrong.
you may, so we wouldn't have to act on. it.
Check with my account maybe.
we can just have an agreement on this. To go back and
Okay.
readjust the ordinance, and then once we look at it one more time. If we're all
So
okay
just
with
vote
it,
on,
it'll get voted on after the public hearing portion.
So what we're talking about here, does
Okay.
that just affect new turbines, or is this on existing turbines, say they could come in and take a 1.5 and turn it into a 2.5 when it's sitting on exactly the same site that was built 10, 15, 20 years ago? So if that
yeah.
fell
We're
under,
talking
So
about
that-
just new windmill farms.
it would be.
yeah,
going.
this is just for this table 1. It's adding human occupiable building, the greater of 1,600 feet or 3.75 times the total height or the manufacturer safety distance as indicated in item 4 Bravo. Enos has a separate change that where he wanted to essentially add adjacent property lines at a smaller distance than what's currently listed, which would be a separate question.
This is just this is just going into new ones now. Repowering is a different topic, correct?
But
Yeah.
repowering
Yes,
is-
yes, repower. Yeah, repowering is a whole separate discussion of changes. Yep.
AJ,
Okay.
I have a point of order or whatever, however you do this.
Sure.
I just want you to, because I found this a little bit confusing too, as I look through this over and over again. So you've got 4, A, B, and C, but then you also, I believe, if I'm right, Jeff, you will also then go back to 1, A or B. Because that's
Correct.
Yes,
property line back. So you've got 2 different
Correct.
setbacks. Okay, so I just want you to realize
Correct.
that. Then you're gonna have to address 1, A or B. Okay, thank you, sorry.
Okay.
So I've made a note to add in table 1, the human occupiable building as listed there in item 4B, based on the conversation consensus from just a moment ago. And so to the point just made and Enos change that was originally discussed on item 1A, Enos wanted to reduce property line setbacks, whereas Mark wanted to eliminate property line setbacks.
and the reason I went to 1 1/4 is because Worthwhile Wind went 1.5 from the interstate highway out here. And it's from the middle of the interstate highway. So there's a little bit of distance in there. So I backed it off to 1.25 because I feel in the case of a disaster, your neighbor's windmill should not fall down across your land and you should not have to deal with it.
Right.
I'll note, as the commission noted during our discussion of the safety setbacks, the safety setbacks came about as a result of not just the potential for the turbines to fall down, but fire hazards. And we've had at least 3 turbine fires in the county, but fire hazards, ice throw, and I know there was at least 1 turbine where the winds had the blade oscillating so bad that the blade essentially blew apart. So the ice throw, the fire hazards, things of that nature. In fact, it was one of the turbine manufacturers' fire safety guidance that specified 1,600 feet. And so that's the background of what the commission had originally come up with regard to the adjacent property lines.
But I think it's safe to say, and you, Mark and Enos can correct me if I'm wrong, but we'd like it to go from human occupable buildings is the line we would like to use. And then the distance
Right.
is, already been discussed. The greater 1,600 feet or 3.75 times.
Right, except that Enos does want property line protections, but at a smaller distance as indicated in 1A.
The reason I wanted AJ is because if you own 160 acres, there's 2,640 feet across that thing. And if you're sitting 100 foot from the road, you're back 2540. And what we're using is 3.75, which is 2,213 feet. So you still got distance between that and your fence line. That's why I think there ought to be a setback on the other side of the fence to keep that windmill away from your fence line if it falls over.
Okay. Both these things kind of contradict each other though.
But there's a gap in there, Mark.
This would be under the assumption that you have a bare section versus a section with homes in it then.
No, I'm talking about 160 acres.
This
You live next to the road and you got it, most of your land's behind you.
But one would kind of overstep the other to me. I mean, if you got the 160 out there and I got the 80 next to it, and I'm right on the property line or whatever. I mean, it's just, it's a little bit contradictive, I think. In my head.
Well, Worthwhile Wind used 110% of the length of the blade because they don't want the blade hanging over the neighbor's property line either. And my attitude is it should go back a little farther because in a disaster, if it goes down, you should not have to clean up with it. You should not have to mess with that thing on your side of the fence. Is that making sense?
Yeah, I understand that.
Yeah, and I don't think they're contradictory if you have this smaller adjacent property line setback and the larger human occupiable building setback. I don't think that they're contradictory. I think they would be complementary. Now, there may well be circumstances where, based on the geography and where somebody's home is relative to their property line, it may be possible that the property line setback becomes moot because the human occupiable building setback pushes that turbine back farther. But there's other circumstances where that would not be the case, where the human occupiable building setback might still allow the turbine to be placed right at the fence line, which is what Enos is trying to protect.
Yes, basically a human aqua building would have the greater distance. It would actually trump the property line, because if it's just the property line out in the middle of a section, then it's just that 1.25. But if you're going up
Correct.
against a human aqua building, then it goes from there out.
Correct.
Yeah, I understand it. And I agree with that too. I mean, if it's off a property line out in that section, then it's, yeah, it should not ever be able to blow, tip over or anything into the neighbor's property.
Okay. All right, so I'll note that change on 1A. So we had a note on item 2 and item 3. They're related to each other. With regard to human occupiable buildings, Enos had indicated that one, he wanted to carve out confinement buildings so that confinement buildings did not fall into the definition of human occupiable building. And he also wanted to create a circumstance in the definition that would preclude somebody from just, dragging a shed out their property line for the sole purpose of trying to game the system, if you will. So that resulted in the change to the definition for human occupiable building on item 2 and the addition of a confinement building definition on item 3.
Yeah, I mean, I have no issue with that myself.
Okay, hearing no other discussion, I'll make a note for item 2 and item 3. We've addressed item 4. Because of the items 2 and 3, we move to item 5, which is adding a new setback for the confinement buildings. Again, that was a recommendation by Enos. And it's essentially the the same thing as what the property line setback discussion was on item 1.
Oh, that's fine by me also. It'd be for safety concerns if it did tip over.
Okay, hearing no other discussion, I'll make a note for that for item 5. Item 6, this is another change recommended by Enos to change the existing setback listed for Iowa DNR Eagle Nest to 1 mile. In the draft, it's reflected as essentially the same thing as what the property lines originally were, 1,600 feet or 3.75 times the total height or MSD. Enos is recommending change that to 1 mile. You may recall DNR in their review of the Worthwhile Wind project, they were recommending a 5-mile setback on the Eagle Nest sites. I think it was 5 miles. It was three or 5. I forget now exactly. But anyway, this would change it to 1 mile.
So the DNR has no regulations,
It's all recommendations.
recommendations.
They'll recommend what they, on any natural resource area and the Eagle's Nest, and yeah, it's all comes on recommendations. They recommend 5 miles is what you said, Jeff?
That's what they
Yes.
recommended.
Yeah, I don't have that document with me, AJ. I'm sorry, I'm on the road right now. I can look that up when I get home and verify, but if memory serves correct, and I know, if I may, Julie, I think you had read that recommendation as well. Do you recall if that was a 3 or 5 mile? In fact, I think you had even presented something to the supervisors.
Yes, I did present that to the supervisors, and it is 5 miles. And Sue is here as well and verifies it is 5 miles that they recommend.
Thank you.
Now, the ordinance, the draft does state in the application section for the turbine permits that if the applicant is not following the DNR recommended setbacks for any manner of things, and DNR recommends setbacks for a whole variety of things, as AJ pointed out. The ordinance says that during the review process, if the applicant is not following the DNR recommendations, that they're required to explain why they are not and what they will do to mitigate the things that the DNR was concerned about. So I just bring that up that because they're not regulations, they're just recommendations. They can be changed, but I think it is important that the ordinance does give some kind of minimums on these things.
As I stated in a supervisor meeting a while back, I think it's absolutely ridiculous in the state of Iowa that animals and birds get a bigger setback than human beings. But on the other side of the coin, considering most of the ordinances that I've read have a 1 mile setback for eagles, considering for the first time in my life, I've seen them on my property twice this year. I hate to drive them out of here too.
There's at least 6 eagle nests already in turbine areas that are already here.
And I'm finding that out, that there's more eagles out there. I just haven't had them around my place.
Been here for over 20 years, probably 30 years since they started nesting in Elk Creek. maybe more. You weren't even born when they started doing. First one was just north of me, a couple miles, I think. First dam. That one's abandoned now. That's the whole that one.
Well, I think,
I'm wide open on this one, guys, whatever you want to do.
I agree, I'm all over the place too, because it seems, yeah, you should have,
Just so it doesn't contradict something the DNR is doing. I mean, you know, like, I don't know.
Well, it's-
How involved they get involved with the master matrix, but you know, they can overrule us if we turn something down. You know, if we turn
Right.
down master matrix, they can
Right.
overrule.
we're not
So,
going anything above and beyond the recommendations.
You're
so-
actually going less, I guess. So
Yeah,
if that
it is.
contradicts what they're recommending, or, you know,
It is.
whatever, but. DNR's got a lot of power. Or can have a lot of power.
I'd say a mile would be sufficient, I mean. I don't know. Yeah, I agree with you, Enos, on the comment between human setbacks and animal setbacks. So. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, I think that change can stay at a mile. You guys are okay with it, Jeff? We'll leave that or run that to a mile.
Okay, I'll make that note for adding the change reflected on item 6. Item 7. Another one suggested by Enos, changing the zoning district boundary setbacks. Essentially reducing the zoning district boundary setbacks to the same thing as what you guys had just talked about for property lines, so that they would be the same.
Within the 3
Yep.
township,
Yeah.
that's what you're talking about, right?
Yes. Yes, yeah. And generally zoning boundary is going to be the same thing as I mean, there's generally going to be a property line at that same location as a zoning boundary change, like from ag to commercial. It's going to be different properties. So they're generally going to be the same, but most of the ordinances that we had reviewed did call out zoning district boundaries. So we added that in and just kept it the same as property line.
Yeah.
So I think it makes sense to do that here as well.
Yeah, I'd agree. It'd be the same as if it was a roadway or anything else. I mean, so.
Okay, hearing no other discussion, I'll make that change for item 7. Item 8. Item 8 is sound analysis during design. And again, I want to emphasize that this is during the design phase of a project. The ordinance required that there were certain things that the applicant had to do during design with regard to sound modeling and so on. One of the changes was to analyze sound levels at property lines within a certain distance of a turbine. The ordinance said property lines within 2.5 miles. Enos is suggesting that it be at the property line within 1 mile.
No, 1.5.
I'm sorry, 1.5. Yes, I'm sorry, 1.5 miles. And then related, item 8B changes that from the analysis at the property line to instead being analysis at the human occupiable buildings. Essentially, it's saying, do the analysis on all the human occupiable buildings within 1.5 miles of a turbine.
Sounds good to me.
Okay. We'll make that note. Now, there was, during this discussion of these proposed changes at the October 4 zoning commission meeting, there was a discussion with regard to protection for building sites being added in. With the reduction of the property line safety setbacks and discussion of sound analysis impacts, if sound analysis impacts are only at the human occupiable buildings, which is what you had just discussed, the zoning commission discussed that there are a lot of building sites in the county that are not currently occupied. We heard from a number of members of the public that had large land holdings, that they had their homes on one part of that, building site, if you will, but they had other building sites on another part of their property that they were looking at in the future developing for their children. And there were a couple of instances based on the plan that Worthwhile Wind had submitted that it was putting turbines pretty close to some of those building sites that didn't have buildings on them yet. And these building sites are sites that are identified as building sites on the county tax records today. So they're clearly visible as a carved out, 3 or 5 acre, what have you, building site in the county tax records. And so the discussion on October 4th was, well, given these kinds of comments that we received from the public, if we do change things from property lines to human occupiable buildings, that essentially makes a lot of these building sites untenable, undevelopable in the future for these folks. And as a result of that discussion, we came up with this concept of adding these designated building sites to have essentially the same protection as human occupiable buildings. During that discussion, it was a 3-2 viewpoint on, do those building sites need that carve out? 2 of the commissioners weren't necessarily adamantly opposed to them. They just didn't see a need that those building sites should have a separate carve out protection. But because it was a 3-2 decision, I added that comment and for conversation in here for discussion by the supervisors as to whether or not you want to help protect those building sites for future development, and whether it be, people's children or new folks coming into the county or what have you. And that's what is the discussion on item 8 down at the very bottom. The addition of design consideration for building sites would add in that or property line of building sites language.
you're kind of writing an ordinance for something that possibly could or could not come. I mean, that could be 20 years down the road, it could be 2 years down the road. How do you, I really don't think that's necessary to have a carve out for that, but
Well, the way it was presented is, and again, there's more than one person had commented to us that they had building sites on their property that they were looking to develop at some point in the future for their daughter. This would essentially put a protection in place for that building site at the same level of human occupiable buildings. Now, those building sites, sometimes they're standalone parcels in the county tax records. Other times they're building site of some number of acres designated in the tax records that are part of a larger parcel. And so it goes back to that base rationale that the zoning commission had of trying to protect the property rights of all of the landowners and not take away the future ability of that landowner to use their land.
Could this be waived?
What do you think, Enos?
I'm right down the middle on that one. As people work more and more remotely from home, one of the biggest things Worth County needs is families moving in here with their children. And if they don't want to live in the city and they want to get an acreage, we want to have those available. But I do understand the fact of it may not be for, you might be sitting on a building site for 20 years before you do anything. I don't know where to go on that one.
Right.
And then the other, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say it gets to the, in addition to just the protection of somebody's rights to develop their land in the future, it's that quality of life issue. We want to try to retain our young folks as they grow up and become active members of the workforce and society. We want to try to retain them in the county. So I think, reserving places, if you will, on their family's property to allow those kinds of things is a good thing for the county. I think if we have some of these standalone building site parcels out there that are afforded these kinds of protections, it makes Worth County that much more attractive for folks to move into. One of the things that NICOG has told us as we've been looking at the development plan is Worth County is rather unique in that we have such a large quantity of folks that live in the county but work outside the county. So in as much as what we can provide protections for these building sites to encourage more folks to stay in the county, because we constantly lose population, and encourage folks to move into the county, I think this is a pretty good way of doing it, and it doesn't cost the county anything to do that.
so at the same token, you got to create jobs for people to move to the county. Granted, people can work remotely, but there has to be reasons to come here too. So it's
Well,
kind
but that was the point that NICOG made to us a little while ago, Mark, is there are more people that are moving to the county and working outside the county. So they're living and spending here, but they're commuting outside the county. And that's on top of the fact that we keep losing population. If we look at Deer Creek as an example, I don't know how much new resident growth we're going to see in Deer Creek because of the concentration of turbines out there, and we know what those effects are. I think this is a really good way for the county to send a message to residents and future residents that the county does value quality of life for its citizens. And like I say, it doesn't cost the county anything to put these protections in place.
Well, you're kind of betting on come. You can look at the whole southwest part of the county and there's not any new development going on down there either. There's not a turbine in sight down there by Fertile and that area there. So, just my opinion, I don't think it needs to be in there.
Can this be wavered?
Yes, yeah. I mean, the waiver section has stand. There's not been any recommendation by any of the supervisors to eliminate these waivers that are there. So it would fall under the waiver provision as well.
If it falls under the waiver position, then it would be fine to have it in there. That's what I
Yes,
think.
it would certainly be. It would certainly be waiverable.
Right.
My understanding, Jeff, is everything we've done and that you guys have done, everything has a waiver on it.
Yes.
Gotcha.
That's my thought. If it's waiverable, I guess I don't have a problem with it being in there.
Okay. So Mark does not think that the building sites need the protection. AJ's good with it, again, providing it's waiverable. Enos, you said you were on the line. Which side of the line do you want to fall on?
I guess considering I'd like to see the county grow with new families, and I know there's people living a long ways from where their jobs are anymore. They're getting back next to their parents. I'd like to see right now, as long as it's got a waiver on it, I'd probably like to see it stay in there.
Okay, I'll make that note then. So item 9. Item 9 essentially changed the sound limits to apply to the human occupiable building instead of property lines. There's 2 different sections that needed language change, but Mark and Enos both wanted to change the sound limits to apply to the human occupiable buildings instead of property lines. Now, well, so given that there were the 2 of you that essentially wanted the same thing, I guess, AJ, do you have concern or conversation on that, or do we just say that to make that change?
Yeah, that's fine. Let's make that change.
Okay. So related to that is the protection of the building site. So it would be human occupiable building or the property line of the building site. So essentially the same protection that we just talked about a moment ago with adding that building site protection in there. Again, also waiverable.
And it falls under the same as what we just discussed. If it's a building site, then it's a building site, so it is
Yep.
waiverable.
Yep.
I'm in favor of it if it's waiverable.
Okay. Next one is shadow flicker for the turbine hosting landowners. The original language said the turbine hosting landowner, and again, they can waive this. They'll experience no more than 30 hours per year, no more than 30 minutes per day, or over 50 days per year. The over 50 days per year language came essentially because a lot of the other ordinances had that 50 days per year. The commission discussed this when we reviewed these changes. The Enos was suggesting elimination of that 50-day per year limit. Commission's fine with that. The other 30 hours per year or 30 minutes per day is sufficient. And again, the turbine hosting landowners can waive all of that. So it's just eliminating that 50-day per year limit.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm okay with that.
Okay, hearing no other discussion, we'll make that change. Item 11, changing the shadow flicker restrictions for adjacent landowners. Again, the recommendation was have that restriction not be at the property line, but instead be at the human occupiable building. And again, we add in the notion of the building site. So essentially we're saying that the shadow flicker restriction is for the human occupiable building or building site.
No shadow flicker.
Correct.
Yep. It's like we're all in agreement on that.
Okay. No other discussion. I'll make that note. Item 12. Enos was recommending to change the permit fee from $1,000 to $2,000 per turbine. Again, the fee for the permits is intended to address all of the ancillary costs that the county has over the life of that project, not just the implementation, but the 20+ years.
AJ stepped out for a second there, Jeff.
Okay.
Upgrading the fees to 1,000, 2,000.
Yeah, we gotta support our administration somehow. When it comes to-
Yeah, and again, as I explained a moment ago, I don't know if you were in when I mentioned this or not, AJ, but the fee is not just during, it's not intended to cover just the activities for the permitting, but it's, any county costs associated with oversight of the activities over the life of the project, the 20 years, what have you.
Yeah, I'm fine with it.
Okay. No other discussion. We'll make that change. So the final one Item 12, I'm sorry, item 13 is upgrade to existing turbines. Essentially, the positions as the commission understood it is Mark wanted no restrictions on upgrade of existing turbines. Enos was suggesting that if the turbine was increased in size up to 10% of the original size, that no permit was required. AJ was suggesting that if it was replaced by something that was 15% greater than the original size, it would not need a permit, provided a third-party engineer affirmed that the base and everything was capable of supporting that added structure.
Correct, because my thoughts on it, I mean, I don't foresee them being able to put a much larger turbine on an existing base with what's there now. So by allowing them some, if they're upsizing just a little bit, it's not gonna be a large issue, but I don't foresee them gonna take a 250 footer and put a 500 foot on top of that base. I just don't think they'll be able to.
No, but if you go off the 1.25 or 3.75, so like I say, if they took a 1.25 or 1.5 and took it to 2.5, which I don't know if they can do either, that would automatically, I understand that coming in and totally tearing one down and rebuilding to a new wind farm, but if they could actually reutilize the base with a bigger turbine, you are eliminating several turbines in some of these areas with those kind of restrictions. So, I mean, there's no doubt, like I say, if they come in and tear it down like they did down in Ventura, for example, they tore all those little ones down to whatever it was, 50, and they took it down to like 15.
Yeah.
So that would fall under the new ordinance.
In which they relocated a lot of them so that they were,
Correct.
they'd probably be in different areas, and
Same footprint, a lot of them ended up in kind of the same area. It seemed like they didn't really.
right, there's just less of them out there. I was just down there this last week, and there's less than half of what was there before.
Yeah.
Mark, I didn't hear you. So that if that happens, then that would be considered a new project to you?
If they tore it all down,
Okay.
absolutely, yeah.
All right,
I mean,
thank you.
that's a new project. What I'm getting
Okay.
at is the fact that
Okay.
some of these turbines are, I think, 1,050 feet away, give or take. And if you went to a bigger turbine, you'd start to fall under that footage or the factor, whatever, the two factors, 3.75, 1.25. Because, I mean, some of them are built right on the fence line, literally within 50 feet of it. Sometimes they were shared, but most of them were built just off of the fence lines. And there's several of them that way there. So they would automatically fall under the new ordinance if they went to a little bit bigger turbine.
But if they use the same base,
If they used the same base and they were able to upsize the turbine, either just by changing the power head or whatever, technology changes all the time. So, it's possible we could, but could be a little different rotor diameter as far as changing the tower. And their ultimate goal, I think, would be to put a new generator on the existing towers. And I know they've done that in some situations. I think they've done it in Winnebago County where they built them, and I think a year or two later they actually upsized the turbines. Not quite doubled them. I think they went from, say, 1.25, I think to 2.5 or something on one of those wind farms.
I think Charles City, Floyd County,
Are they doing it there now? Or
oh, they did it a few years ago, but they didn't change the sides or anything. They changed the heads, they changed the blades, used the towers, but like I said, the technology has changed where they could get more power out of the same size head,
Right.
same size
Right.
generators,
And-
same size blades.
But I'm just.
And that the language of the ordinance as it's written now would allow those kinds of things. The only thing that the ordinance says with regard to having to go through permitting is if you change the nacelle, the power head, and the blades, and it results in a geographically, physically larger size. So it goes from 350 feet to 500 feet or 400 feet. If it changes the physical size, then it would have to go through permitting. But if all it does is increase the power by changing the power head and putting some new rotors on it, that's just a routine operation, routine upgrade according to the ordinance. It would not require permitting.
Like say, I'm not an engineer, but obviously there's only so much more you're gonna be able to do with that existing base, existing tower structure. They're only built to hold so much anyways. So
Yep.
I don't foresee
Right.
this being much of an issue, but
For what they cost, they're not gonna put a new $1,000,000+ tower on an old foundation. It's not gonna hold it regardless.
right. I mean, to me, like if anything, I could see the original wind farm, the smaller ones there by Joyce, that could turn into like the ones out south of Ventura, where they would take those whatever 50, 60 out of there and replace it with 25, because they can get the same amount of power out of 25. I could see a repower going in through Kensett,
Second phase, yeah.
and I'm just replacing those nacelles and blades and probably be the same size. I could,
Possible.
but without knowing that, without having gone through a repower project, we don't know.
Right.
I know they have replaced some in the Kensett and nothing's changed as far as size.
No, they just went back to the originals that they're new enough or whatever, so.
Because they've got one they
Right.
want to replace
Correct.
with the same exact thing.
Yep.
So. To me, I don't see this being a problem, but we don't want to, I mean, obviously, there's some there that have been there for a long time and could probably stay there, and I just don't see where they're gonna replace a 250 with a 500 without completely redoing everything. They just can't.
I would assume the bases are
Yeah,
quite a bit bigger. I don't really know.
yeah, they can't.
I just want to be able to have them, if they want to use the same base and the same tower and put a bigger power head on it, and maybe the blade size changes a little bit, I want them to be able to do that without having to go through all the permitting.
Right.
Does that make
But
sense?
yeah, and I agree with that too. I just don't want them to be able to come in and double the size of one without any questions, because then we're back at the 1,000-foot setbacks. Yeah,
We got the same problem all over again.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I don't know what the percentage is. I don't know whether it should be 10. I don't know whether it should be 15 or what.
right.
Well, if you look at the chart on the very first page of the document, so if you look at Barton Township, top of Iowa 2, top of Iowa 3, those are 400-foot towers, 399, 400-foot towers at 1 point. So at a 15% growth, it puts them at the same size as what's in Deer Creek right now. If you give them a 10% growth, it gets them up to 439 feet. So the zoning commission felt that if you wanted to add a buffer in the circumstance like Enos described, where essentially it's blades that are increasing the height, then we felt that such growth should be limited to the 10% of the original total height. But we also liked AJ's recommendation on including the third-party affirmation that this increased height, for whatever reason, is supportable by the structure.
So, like I say,
So essentially saying 10% with an engineer saying, yep, 10% growth is supportable.
Right.
Is that the way you
Yeah.
guys want to go, or?
Like say, there
Okay.
has to be some language in there. It can't be, you know, because we don't, I just don't feel that anything is gonna go that much larger because they're just not capable of doing it. So everything's gonna stick to the same size and they still might be able to produce more power out of the same size with just newer technology because the stuff's all 10+ years old and everything.
They can do
Right.
that, some computer technology, and they've already done some.
Right,
upgrades out
so
there.
I think 10% is a safe number.
Okay,
With an engineering study,
All right.
right?
With the engineering,
Yes.
yes. Approval,
Yep.
yes.
Yeah.
Because that comes into
Okay,
a safety,
all right.
or if they're putting stuff on foundations that shouldn't be, then
I'll make that note. The last thing, there was additional discussion by the commission. This is independent of the changes that the supervisors had submitted. The current draft requires agency reviews by a variety of agencies, reviews of the projects in advance. It was noted that since Worthwhile Wind is, they've gone through fairly recently, over the last couple of years, they've gone through a number of these agency reviews. The ordinance describes those agency reviews as being done within a certain time period, but recognizing that some of the things that the agencies are looking at don't change, very quickly over time, like roads and stuff. They don't change that dramatically. So there was a suggestion that we create a carve out waiver, if you will, explicitly for Worthwhile Wind that says that they don't have to have new reviews by these agencies that are listed here, outside of the time period. So essentially, it's, they don't have to go back and redo it. Now, if something was done 4 years ago, then yeah, they should be reviewed. But for some of these things, they just felt that the things those agencies are reviewing don't change very frequently anyway, so they should get a pass on some of those if they've already had the reviews.
correct. And the way we've seen it, most everybody's doing their homework on it, so. I think a lot of it you have to. Have certain agencies review this stuff, so.
Right.
I'm fine.
Okay. Any other discussion on them? All right, we'll make that change as well. So I'll get these changes worked up. It won't take very long, and I'll get those to you yet before the end of the week with the updated ordinance with these changes that were discussed today.
Okay, is when are you guys meeting again?
Well, the commission, we're not meeting again until January, but the changes that you guys just discussed, I can just make those changes in the draft because you've already discussed, what those changes should be. So, and again, they're your changes. So I'll make the changes in the ordinance and get you a clean draft with those changes reflected.
Sounds good. Thank you for your help, Jeff. Appreciate it.
All right, thank you. Bye.
Anything else on that, guys? Or are we good for now?
Should be good.
Okay.
Good.
Moving on, Manly area potential economic development discussion. we've got ourselves a unique opportunity down there. And talking with, Lee Kiewit this morning. We had another discussion with Ready Fuels and, they're seeking out financing options and, would we could be basically a letter of guarantor. But those guys, pretty much when it's all said and done, then we'll have some sort of agreement so that we could get access to that pipe, you know, to, if we needed to extend it somewhere else in the county or whatever, but all reality, it'll be theirs. They'll operate it, or they'll have somebody operate it, or they'll sell it to somebody to operate it, whatever. But at the end of the day, we'll have an agreement together with them, but it will be theirs, which they're paying for it, so.
So how soon can we figure out what that potential, what that building would potentially be worth as far as assessed valuation, whether we could utilize that for the TIF, guaranteeing the TIF, or whether we have to use something else?
Right, I will have to, they've got an idea of everything. I don't know if they actually have a 3D mock-up yet, but I can get with Lee again and see if they've got anything that can provide us structure sizes that are actually gonna be structures and not equipment.
Correct. Without, I mean, whether it's a
Yeah,
30, 50, 100, I mean, whatever the building is, we need to know what the actual value of the building will be somewhat, and then we can see what you think would be assessed
Right.
at.
Yeah, just need to get some plans.
Yeah,
and then that could get us started. Like I said, then we could, that's what I told Lee also, we could create a minimum assessment for 5 years.
then we would know.
Or whatever, you know, then this is what you'll pay minimum no matter what, and that's what help. You know, that's if we're borrowing the money. Technically, if we go as a guarantor, we're got the money set aside, but we're not borrowing it unless we absolutely have to, so.
We still need to replace, it still ties up
We still need to be able to have
whatever the amount
accessibility to it.
is.
Yeah,
And I
Yeah.
realize that would be a declining balance, I would assume, you know.
Right.
Once, I mean, year by year, they're gonna be paying down that debt, so I
Mhm.
think that would be a declining guarantee.
Yep.
As we get.
we would gain that back as we go. So what are your thoughts on that, Edith?
I agree with you. We're basically gonna guarantee the thing, and then as they make the payments, we could take that money and use it.
Correct. It'll open up.
We're gonna have to have that money out there available if something should go wrong.
Correct.
What could go wrong?
Okay, I'll talk with Lee a little more and see if they've got
How much time we have?
at least some blueprints or something. We can actually get some square foot numbers on buildings, permanent structures,
Permanent structures. Yeah.
that will be taxed. To go along with this, so.
Mhm.
And then we can, but what it boils down to basically is if it is something we decide to do, we'll just have to make a decision here at the table, get them a letter of support, and then obviously we'll have time
Yep.
to get our ducks in a row.
Not to interrupt you, but I don't know if you can answer this, Cindy, or not. Black Hills Energy puts a pipeline in, it's centrally assessed. Ready Fuels puts a pipeline in, then it would not be centrally assessed.
I need to verify.
Oh, just curious.
Yep, no, that's.
I mean,
a good
it's gonna
question.
have a value, so,
Yep.
and as long as it's
And
privately
it's a ready,
owned,
ready mill? Is that it?
Ready Fuels,
Ready
right?
fuel.
Ready Fuels. I
Yep.
don't have a card, I think it's at home, but
That's Ready Fuels, Iowa. And it, you know, with they said pipelines cannot go down the right of way.
No, I think-
Pipeline companies, is that how I read
I
that?
think if you read it closer, I've gotten some more information I'll send you.
Yeah.
But I think you guys actually can.
yeah. we'd have to-
I think after reading it, there's a lot of, there's more information that I've got that says you can than what you be careful you can't. I think as
Right,
long as the board agrees to it, then.
And this is not a 24-inch
Right.
monster
right, we're
going
not
down, you know,
talking
that I
No.
wouldn't consider that. We're talking a 6-inch line. There's towns with 6-inch stuff in it right now.
Right,
you know,
right.
So I wouldn't,
They put natural gas lines from the border station north to New Haven now.
right,
In the state highway right away,
Yeah,
so.
yeah, that all went down, and that's a smaller line, a service line,
Yeah, it's
basically.
not six.
We were looking at owned right away versus easement right away, and I don't think there's much of a difference between
Right.
what we can do with utilities.
Would this structure be all underground? I mean, would there be?
Well,
The pipe would be.
I
Like,
would
but
assume
what about-
unless there's body of water to the cross, but I can't think of anything where, they
I
used to
assume
take
it's
them and
gonna be
arch them over a
state
drainage
assessed.
ditch or something, for example, but I
Yeah.
don't know if they do that or
Or do they need relief valves anywhere, or any sort of?
Control stations.
They might,
Where's it going from?
it would be from Hamlin.
not.
down.
Basically, Allentown down 380.
Yep, we go north of the ethanol plant area, go north, hit 380th, and then shoot straight west or east to Mammoth Terminal.
The station yet.
So,
No.
Right.
how about the 6 inch?
So, but anywho, I'll try to get some more out of Lee if we can get the actual building sizes and that stuff. Coordinate that. And
Yeah.
keep moving forward so they can hopefully get this project secured.
I talked to Jane Saturday night, she's excited.
Bloomingdale?
Yep.
Good. Good. Got any questions or comments, Enos, or?
Nope.
Yeah.
I think it's a positive if it all works out. I think it's good for Worth County.
Yes. I agree. You throw a lot of jobs to the region and a good tax base to boot.
Yep.
All right, Melissa had a chat in there. She had to peel out to another appointment, so we'll move on there. People service, I don't think we have anything there. Department heads.
You have your sign bases put in. We'll just wait for the signs and
Oh, you
figure out
do?
how to structurally.
Okay.
We've got the bases and then we've got some angle, but as far as what the sign materials made out of, we'll get that figured out when we, if we gotta buy plywood or whatever to support them, or we'll use whatever. The bases are in, so they're down to freeze.
Good. That's good. Thank you for that.
For department head.
Yeah, go ahead, Mark.
Iowa Department of Homeland Security came out with their after action improvement plan from the derecho last year. I haven't finished reading it yet. It's not that thick, but there's a lot of information in there. If anybody's interested in it, I can forward you a copy. They had some good strong points and they had some areas for improvement. So, one of the things was the local emergency management offices had struggles staffing their EOCs. It shouldn't come as no big surprise.
Right.
And then there's trouble getting information from the locals back to the state, and the state actually being able to get good quality situation reports from what was happening out local.
The paper trail is tough, is what you're saying. It's always that way when it comes up.
Right.
Different entities
And
working
I'll-
together.
When I get a chance, I'll digest it more and see, but then I'm sure you'll see more stuff coming down in the next year or two from that, whether it's, training to help address those issues and stuff like that. So,
Okay.
but it's out there. If you're interested, let me know. I can just forward you the email.
Sure. Sounds good.
Very briefly, I brought it up to a couple of you, but we did get that Helmsley Foundation grant for new AEDs. I got confirmation that they were shipped this morning. We can't do any movement on that until we get the new ones, but on the old ones, which are Zolls, they're very well worth using still. My recommendation would be if anybody in the county, I know like we want to put one in the command center. But if someone in the county would want one of them, they give them to them. Otherwise, make them available to our emergency services to upgrade theirs. So I'll need that for an action item to move forward with that for next week, if you guys want to think about it.
You guys don't have it in your office?
We have 0.
You guys actually should have a couple of your vehicles too. Right. Let's go to conservation first.
We don't have any upstairs and
You got them in your satellite shots,
the.
the EDs?
In the office.
I don't
Or
think we
the-
do.
They don't, I
I
don't
don't
think they
think
have
we do.
anything.
We don't have anything. We have first aid kit
How about recycling?
and we got batteries.
I think
We'll have 13 available.
okay, because I think recycling should, just because there's a large amount of public that goes through that facility. You guys having them in your vehicles are out in the public. And anybody can use them. I mean, as long as you've been trained on it. Even any bystander, anybody can use it, so.
The only thing they'll
And then
need-
let's get some in yours, at least get them in your buildings.
Right.
Maybe your foreman needs one. As well, but if we got 13 to I think we can find places for them.
They'll probably need new pads, and this kind does take both a ped and an adult pad. So those would have to be replaced. I think the batteries, they come and go.
I want to offer some training again too.
Right, yeah. Yeah, and they're pretty simple.
You say everyone on our staff is certified.
Okay. Yeah, if they go somewhere like with the roads guys, get them all familiar with them, so if they do need them, they're
I'm not trying to start the car.
right, exactly.
It's not a bad idea.
But I think, yeah, we can get rid of those, keep them within the county for other buildings.
As long as they get picked up and not sitting in my office, I don't care.
Take him to Jim's office, he's got room.
Say that about my old printers.
They could be.
Any other department heads?
Just an FYI, looking forward to budget stuff. I know this is not a favorite topic, but we're looking at, all my vendors are saying at least a 30% increase in labor costs coming up for next year. So that's gonna hit some offices for projects, for IT projects and things like that. They're having to hire people at higher wages, which of course they're trickling that stuff down. IT equipment, if we can get it, it's gonna be about 15 to 20% more than what we're paying here in the last couple of years, so. Yeah, so
As just like a general, like the bulk of our equipment, we're probably sitting fairly good, aren't we?
for our, I mean, we've been refreshed pretty well. I mean, the storage is what, 3 years old. I think the hosts, I'm gonna do a software firmware refresh on those. Those are 4. So I mean, we've got 2-3 years of life. I've got enough laptops coming in and desktops to refresh what I need to for the next this fiscal.
Right. Because we got grant on that, correct?
Yep, grant on that. And then I'd actually 2020, I bought some equipment just because I thought we were gonna do maybe some more remote. And I didn't deploy that, so that will be deployed for equipment that's going out of service, end of life. The sheriff's office refreshed laptops 3 years ago, so 2 years ago?
2 years ago.
2 years ago? I don't know, 2020 doesn't count anymore, so I kind of skipped that one. So realistically, we're in pretty good shape. The firewalls are gonna get replaced here in December, so there will be some downtime, there will be some hiccups. But that's just because the current firewall is dying poorly. So not. Yeah, no. So just to let you know, though, I do spend about $15,000 to $20,000 in outside vendor just for projects and break fix. So that will probably go up. That figure.
We don't have it. Do it anyways, and
I'll pass that along.
the CEOs don't need to make as much, right?
So much for raises for us.
30%. Okay, any other department heads? Supervisor, Mr. Loberg.
I didn't have anything besides that natural gas pipeline meeting that we all had for the Manly terminal.
Pipeline meeting, and then did have Central Iowa juvenile detention Friday. Zoomed in on that, just general budget stuff. We don't have anybody there, so that's good.
Other than our special meeting, I didn't have anything either. So. All right, everything on the agenda for next week. So looks like it. Futures, okay. I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I'll second it.
All right, all in favor, aye.
All right.
Aye. Meeting adjourned. Thank you, everybody.